everyone. This will be the last ADHD themed video that I'll make for a while to put on this channel. And we're going to try and make a bridge back to the usual subject matter of MBTI related biz. This one's going to be especially speculative versus my other ones with any ADHD in them. Because I'm going to put something out there and that I have had viewers ask me about, write me in private message, and something that I've considered myself and discussed with others interested in the MBTI in my real life, and those interested in ADHD as well. And that is it possible for people of a judging type to also have ADHD? I know that some are. You know, for example, we can look at Tom Davison and go check out his lovely channel. He is someone who has recently obtained a diagnosis, and I know there are others. And it seems to me that it should not be incompatible, really, theoretically or otherwise, the idea that people of any of the judging types, as well as any of the perceiving types, could possibly have this disorder. This because within the MBTI and within the Jungian typology upon which it's based, this is entirely about temperamental preferences. So again, the distinction should be made that just because you have a temperamental preference for something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best at actualizing embodying that preference. And anything that might be associated with that preference as far as things in the outward world go. So no, there really shouldn't be any contradiction there. Although I think what you might expect to see, and this is purely speculative, I don't know if anyone's ever done any studies on this. So I'm putting it out there, and I'll be very interested to see if there are any people who do strongly identify with a type that has the judging preference in it, an MBTI one, who also has ADHD. I'll be very curious as to what those people would say about it. I would guess, though, that overall there are probably more people who are of one of the 8 perceiving types within the MBTI model who identify with ADHD. But I'd say there are about, last head count I did, there were about 11 people of various judging types that I know in my face-to-face life who I really do think probably do have ADHD, or they're on the spectrum. It's a spectrum disorder. They're definitely exhibiting a lot of symptoms that do go with ADHD. That doesn't mean they have it. Of course it doesn't, especially coming from me, but it does look, they're showing a lot of the features of it, and they are self-reporting on identifying with a lot of the features of it. So that's what I'm going on. So here's what I'm going to give you. I've also had several INFJ viewers write into me and ask my opinion on that. Do I think it's possible for an INFJ to have ADHD? And the answer is yes. So here are some of the observations that I've had. Again, take them as you will. That's all they are. It's just one person's observations, and the observations and input from some other people I know who are interested in both those subjects and have something to say about what they've observed of some people they know who seem to be of the judging temperamental preference, who also have ADHD. But it might be that the symptoms, here's what I would expect to see, and what I think I have seen more often in some people of these types, which, by the way, in my case, I should also disclose, put it in context. Most of these people I'm thinking of are NJ types, NTJ and NFJ types. But that's not because, and there's one in particular I'm thinking of who is an SFJ, I believe an ISFJ type. But I don't think that, I think that what that reflects, that trend, it reflects more the trend in what kind of people I attract into my social life versus any actual trend out there in an ADHD population. I think what I have seen, or what I think I could expect to see, where now I'm really like, going out on a limb here, but we'll see if any reflection comes back on this. It might be the case that I would think that a lot of people with ADHD who are of one of the judging types, they might have a tendency to, as most people of the J types do, but not all, by no means all, but have a tendency to highly desire a more, compared to most of the perceivers, a more organized environment. And a more tidy one. And I would think that those of the judgers that have ADHD, that they would still be able to obtain that, but I would expect that they would be putting in a lot more effort and a lot more time and a lot more thought and a lot more vigilance into making that happen. With the core symptoms of ADHD being what they are and pulling focus away, and where you don't have as much control as you otherwise would if you're neurotypical over where your focus goes. I could imagine a lot of people of the judging type with ADHD being much more more likely than their neurotypical J peers to sort of feel a need to check and recheck, because if they have ADHD, they've got that skipping record thing going on. Probably they do, in their mind, where they forget where they were in the middle of things, and their sequencing can be off in terms of keeping on top of linear processes. So I would expect to see much more sort of anxiety around that kind of thing than maybe versus a lot of the perceivers with ADHD. I would also see, and I think I have seen, I'm thinking of an INTJ person in particular that I saw every day and was kind of close to for a couple of years of my life. And I think there might also be more of a tendency to have somewhat stereotype behavior that goes with, like, again, the needing the structure, or wanting, or desiring the structure, wanting a very structured way of life. And so kind of being, stereotyping quite a bit, like being sort of extra, rigid about keeping to a certain way of doing things at a certain time, being very ironclad about the routines, almost as if it were, a real need, an extra need for security for that person. That's something I've seen. I don't know if that's generalizable or not. Another thing that I've seen or would expect to see is the sort of the driven, as if driven by a motor, sort of hyperactivity symptom that is part of the DSM criteria, which becomes much less pronounced in most people as they get older, as they reach adulthood. But there might still be this kind of like need to be busy, like always just pottering around, always just doing something. I would expect a lot of, again, I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but I would expect that judger type people who have ADHD, who are like that, they'd be less likely to be sort of the wool gathery types. They'd be more likely to be the ones who just need to be always just tidying and ordering and making extra lists and checking those lists very carefully over and over again and that kind of thing. I would expect to see a little more of that in that subpopulation. Although they would still be having the same core symptoms of not necessarily being in the proper, consistent control to the same level as, say, other people of judging, of a judging temperamental preference who don't have ADHD, who are neurotypical. So they might, they might just be extra kind of about it, about enacting their greater orderliness, preference for greater orderliness. What I would expect to see too versus neurotypical judgers would be perhaps also even a more pronounced kind of hyper focus, as you will see. I don't see why there would be a contraindication to that tendency to be, have the rest of the world fall away when they're pursuing an activity that they particularly find stimulating, and that in effect is kind of acting as a neurocorrector for the ADHD symptoms. It's something that's very stimulating for them. I can see how they could get just as hyper-focused as any perceiver and gets kind of stuck in an activity for long period, like abnormally long periods of time with no breaks and no distraction and no, where the attention is abnormally focused for an abnormally long time. I don't see why people of the judging types wouldn't also experience that. Then there's like the emotional dysregulation part. I don't see why they wouldn't have just as much susceptibility to that as people of the perceiving type, to, have a very, reactive amygdala and very poor or relatively poor top-down executive management coming from, the prefrontal cortex to kind of calm the amygdala down once it's alerted. I don't see any reason why that would be different whether you're a perceiver or a judger. The other thing is where I would expect to see the same amount of cognitive deficit and same ADHD typical kind of executive functioning deficit in action would be that probably I expect the judger type to be, maybe better at planning, and wanting more to plan, to put more into it, more difficult though it might be for them versus their neurotypical judging preference peers, to make plans and enact plans and get things all settled and get things all sorted. But I would expect to see that both perceivers and judgers would be showing a sort of the tendency to shy away from planning, heavy-duty planning activities that really tax the executive functioning system. So things that involve a great deal of detail and drudgery and boredom and complexity that taxes that. I could see that a judger type person, wanting to avoid that, or being extra drained by having to attend to it when it's necessary and they can muster what it takes to attend to those kinds of things. I could see them having just as hard a time with that as the perceivers. As well, I would imagine that people of the judging type would be pretty much like the perceivers too, in that they would not be looking after their matters that are associated with self-organizing in a complex and consistent way over time in order to achieve their medium-term and long-term goals. So for example, where you might see a deficit in, say, retirement planning or something like that for an adult with ADHD who's of the perceiving type, I don't see why you wouldn't see quite a bit of that kind of thing being lacking and not being done, and not being done as regularly or to the same extent versus the neurotypical judging type peers in the judger type person with ADHD. So that's what I got so far. Those are just my speculations, and I'd be very interested to hear it, particularly if there is anyone out there who is confirmed as they can confirm their temperamental preferences in alignment with one of the eight judging types in the MBTI, and who is confirmed to have ADHD as well. It would be very valuable information, and I'm telling you, I'd be very interested in it. But also, apparently, several of my viewers would be interested in that too. So I'd really doubly appreciate it if any of you care to speak up about that and leave some comments below. That would be great. And again, to all who have, thank you very much for watching. And this is it for, we're going to close the ADHD door for a while around here, maybe forever. And I'm going to be doing that kind of thing, addressing topics related to that on another channel from now on. So, goodbye.